Hey everyone, today I'm going to quickly go over the best raid build for Pally tanks in Season of Discovery Phase 1. Right now, survivability doesn't really matter, so we can mostly ignore that. As for threat, you should have plenty of single target threat if you're doing a lot of damage. AoE threat at this point doesn't matter much since none of the trash does any damage, and DPS can easily tank them. So really, we kinda just care about doing damage this phase. For these reasons, we're just going to look at the top 20 Pallies in the boss damage tank category on Warcraft logs to see what's working best for Pally tanks right now. This category shows us the average damage a tank did over a single full BFD run, giving us a better idea of what the best overall approach is rather than looking at specific boss tech. I'll have a link to the Google Sheet in the description if you'd like to take a look. For the chest rune, it's no surprise that every top 20 Pally tank is using Divine Storm. This gives us good damage and AoE threat, and none of the other options in this slot are useful in the current meta. Hand rune is slightly more interesting, with 55% running Crusader Strike exclusively, 25% running Majority Crusader Strike with a couple swaps to Hand of Reckoning, 15% running exclusively Hand of Reckoning, and 5% running Majority Hand of Reckoning with a couple swaps to Crusader Strike. Those that swapped from Crusader Strike to Hand of Reckoning generally did so for Gamura and Akumai. In the current meta, it isn't too surprising to see Crusader Strike get so much play over Hand of Reckoning. The taunt isn't 100% necessary for anything in BFD, and only potentially useful for a couple things. The fights are also so short that the mana return from Hand of Reckoning doesn't really matter, on top of the fact that we take so little damage that we don't even get much mana back from it. And since we don't really take damage, the Earned Defender portion of Hand of Reckoning is also inconsequential. The threat increase from Hand of Reckoning is nice, but Crusader Strike can make up for that while also dealing damage. For leg runes, there isn't a ton of variety. 60% run purely Exorcist, while 40% make a swap to Rebuke only for Twilight Lord Kelris. This is mostly a utility rune slot, and the only other damage competitor is Avenger Shield, but Exorcist has the edge on single target damage and doesn't require a weapon swap. For Spec, all of the top 20 Pallies are running 0016 Ret. I can't see their individual talents on Warcraft logs, but it's going to be something similar to this. Prot isn't seeing any play for a few reasons. Let's look at what Prot brings. Increased survivability, mainly when using a shield, increased threat, and Blessing of Kings. Survivability doesn't matter right now. Blessing of Kings is unnecessary due to Aspect of the Lion, and we can just get increased threat through doing increased damage from Ret talents. As for Holy, the main selling point is of course Consecration, but AoE threat doesn't really matter at all right now, since none of the trash does damage and Divine Storm is enough to mostly keep stuff on you anyway. People ask me all the time about which profession item to get, and I recommend the blacksmithing chest since it buffs your raids damage all the time. You can see here that 60% of the top 20 Pally tanks use the blacksmithing chest, 30% use the leatherworking gloves, and 10% don't use any profession item, so the personal gain from leatherworking gloves is pretty negligible. Just buff your raid with the blacksmithing chest. As for weapon, all of the top 20 Pally tanks use a two-hander. Deadly Strike of the Hydra is the top option, with Fathom Blade as the second best, and Varigan's Fist being used by anyone who hasn't gotten one of the other two weapons. So with all of that information, let's build a profile. The typical top damage Pally tank is Ret, using a two-hander in the blacksmithing chest, with Divine Storm for the chest rune, Crusader Strike for the hand rune, and Exorcist for the leg rune, sometimes Rebuke for Kelris. I personally love the one-hander shield prot version of Pally tank, so I'm hopeful it will be the go-to Pally tank in future phases. It just needs something like Warriors have with Devastate, where the ability is really good, but forces you to use a shield. Hammer of the Righteous from Wrath, which requires a one-hander to use, or Shield of Righteousness from Wrath, which requires a shield to use, seem like no-brainers to add, so I'm hopeful that Pally tank won't stay in this state past this phase. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.